Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Brian Kelly made it abundantly clear that this LSU program was going to get aggressive in the transfer portal, specifically going after that interior defensive line, getting that talent, getting that depth in place, heading into 2024. Want to take a look at a few names that have hit the portal at that position that I think would be really good targets for this LSU program. Going to sprinkle in a few other positions and names that I really like for LSU as well. But make no mistake about it, the focus for this and the focus for Brian Kelly and LSU is going to be on the inside of that defensive line. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. And I would love to hear some feedback from y'all in the comment section regarding the players that we're talking about, maybe some other positions that you would like to see LSU go after. And if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with, for my money, the best interior defensive lineman that's available in the portal and probably going to be the best that's available during these next 2 weeks. That's TCU defensive lineman Dominic Williams. We talked about him yesterday afternoon in terms of spots and landing spots that would make sense. LSU's at the top of the list, right? LSU is in dire need of depth and talent on the inside of the defensive line. Dominic Williams is probably one of the better interior defensive linemen that you'll see in college football heading into 2024. Brian Kelly said he wants to address it. This is a name, and this is how you would go about addressing it. In my mind, you take a look at Dominic Williams. Part of the thing that I love about Dominic Williams is he's not necessarily a flashy stat sheet kind of guy, but he's one of those players that makes your whole defense just play better because he wins at the point of attack. He takes on double teams. We talked a little bit about him yesterday afternoon. This is a guy that, played that nose tackle role in a 3-3-5 defense with TCU. Not really a very great spot to get a ton of production and wreck a lot of games. But when you watch Dominic Williams, he allows everyone else around him to play at such a high level because he's keeping them clean. He's taking on double teams. He's winning at the point of attack. You look at guys like Greg Penn or Whit Weeks or Harold Perkins playing that linebacker role. How much better are they going to play if they're playing behind a guy in Dominic Williams who really just wins at the point of attack, one of the better defensive linemen at just eating up double teams that you see in the country at 6'2", low pad level, 320 pounds. You check the film out. This is a guy that has heavy hands. He plays with good pads. I love Dominic Williams. I think this would go such a long way in addressing that LSU interior defensive line concern. Now, the only, I would say, negative about getting Dominic Williams, it's not a huge negative, and it is he's going to be a really expensive player, right? You take a look at the resources that you're going to have to use to get Dominic Williams to LSU. You're going to have USC. You're going to have Oklahoma. You're going to have Texas. Really big players going after Dominic Williams. The one argument that I would kind of consider in saying, hey, we're going to pass on Dominic Williams is saying, hey, we're going to use our resources to go get 2 or 3 defensive linemen as opposed to using all these resources to go get one really, really good interior guy, Dominic Williams. Now, I still would try to get Dominic Williams and some more help, but I can understand that argument where LSU might be sitting there and saying, all right, is it worth it to just go get one, or should we go get 3 quality guys? I think that's probably a conversation that LSU's having, not about if Dominic Williams is good enough to play at LSU. Now, the next player I want to go to, very similar kind of player to Dominic Williams. Now, the questions with CJ West. He's already offered by LSU. I think this would be another really good fit for CJ West. Very similar body type, right? 6'2", 315. Play that similar role in the defense in terms of low pads, eating up double teams. I think the question with CJ West, especially with line of scrimmage players, is can you make that jump from the group of 5 to the SEC? You can normally see a smoother transition for guys that are playing more in space, are more athletes. The line of scrimmage play, there is a big difference between dominating the MAC level and then dominating in the SEC. CJ West, I don't think comes in and dominates like Dominic Williams, but is a guy that is certainly going to be in year 2 deep for this LSU interior defensive line. And again, Brian Kelly said, we need depth. We just need bodies. CJ West would give you those bodies. And again, 24 run stops, a 10% pass rush win rate, there's a lot to like about CJ West's game. I think it's very similar to Dominic Williams, just probably not as good. I wouldn't be surprised for LSU to really go after a guy like CJ West. The last defensive lineman I want to talk about just hit the transfer portal early this morning, originally from the state of Georgia. Simeon Barrow from Michigan State. He's a good player. 15 run stops, 17 quarterback hurries, a 14% pass rush win rate during that 2023 year. You turn on the film, little bit of a different kind of interior defensive lineman than Dominic Williams, than CJ West. He's a little bit more of an athlete as opposed to a double team kind of space eater kind of guy. Now, Simeon Barrow is a defensive lineman that gives you a lot of juice from the pass rush, which is kind of rare. You don't really find many interior defensive linemen that can really provide a ton of pass rush juice. CJ West, a little bit. Dominic Williams, a little bit. Simeon Barrow, he's a guy that I think can provide a little bit more juice. I went back and watched his game against Nebraska this morning. Really good get off. He's got some good length. He is a phenomenal athlete for 290 pounds. He carries that weight exceptionally well. So I could see LSU going out and getting a guy like Simeon Barrow. Now, I would probably prefer guys like Dominic Williams and CJ West, because when I look at LSU and where my concerns are on the defensive line, it's guys that can win at the point of attack, that can help be an influence in the run game. We got good pass rushers on the edge. I think Brian Kelly made that clear. We feel good about what we have in our edge rushers. We're more concerned about the big bodies on the inside. I think Dominic Williams and CJ West probably go a little bit farther and kind of shoring that up. Now, those are the three defensive linemen that if I'm LSU, I'm really taking a look at. You have Jermaine Lolea coming from Louisville as well, but it doesn't sound like he's going to take a visit to LSU. I want to get into a few other positions that maybe LSU does decide to address. And again, make no mistake about it, the interior defensive line for LSU is going to be the priority. Brian Kelly made that clear. You look at the secondary, and I just say I would like to get a little bit more experience in there. You go back to watch the spring game. We covered it after it happened. It's still an inexperienced group. And again, the problems with this LSU secondary is not that they don't have the athletes to be good enough. It's just that it's a young group learning a new scheme. How do you mitigate some of those problems? By going and getting a guy that has played a lot of football, gives you a lot of versatility. And there's one that's from the state of Louisiana, has played Power 5 football before. That's Greedy Vance Jr. Now, a couple of things that I really like about Greedy Vance Jr. One, a really, really solid football player that just kind of got squeezed out of a really good Florida State secondary room, guy that was a key rotational piece. You take a look at 1,300 snaps, has played both nickel and the boundary. I think he's from Louisiana. He has a ton of experience playing multiple positions in the back end, but most importantly, he gives you that experience and versatility that I think LSU is just lacking a little bit. And again, I like the young names that LSU has. It's a lot of names. I think they got 20 scholarships in terms of the cornerbacks and safeties. So maybe it's hard to fit Greedy Vance Jr. kind of onto that scholarship chart, but I look at the youth and say, we could use a little bit more experience. I think Greedy Vance Jr. certainly could provide that experience. Now, the last position I want to talk about, and again, this is gravy. This is not a need. I would much prefer LSU to make sure that they get this defensive line right before they start addressing these other positions, is going to be Andrew Paul, a Georgia running back that I think is sneaky really, really good. Like, I loved him coming out of high school. His high school film is very impressive. Every time I get to see him get reps at Georgia, whether it's in garbage time, whether it's in the spring games, I always look at him and say, this dude can play. He's just behind really good running backs at Georgia. If you're LSU and you're looking for maybe just one more piece of depth in that running back room, outside of guys like Caleb Jackson, Josh Williams, you have Caden Durham coming in the summer, I think Andrew Paul would make a lot of sense. He's not a guy that's going to break the bank from an NIL department. Probably, actually, scratch that. Just came to my mind. He can't even transfer to LSU because of the SEC rules. So I would like to see LSU potentially add a running back. That just popped up in my brain. That is still a very difficult concept for me to learn. Andrew Paul cannot transfer to LSU due to the SEC transfer rules. Apologize for that. Would like to see LSU take a look at another running back, but it probably can't be Andrew Paul. Those are the names that I have for you guys. Again, we'll continue to update this conversation as more guys enter the transfer portal. Appreciate y'all checking the fellas out. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. and we'll talk to y'all later.